Bam, right, my friends, here we go again. Watch, wow, what a view. That is amazing. Today I want to explain in an extra video why the American ball, how I call it with the American flag, is something special to me, you know. Now I have a Spalding ball. As a kid I had an American rubber ball. And why the American flag on? Because to me, to us kids, you know, we come from the late 80s, early 90s, that was the greatest, the best, and that it was, you know. And I will explain you why, because nowadays when you say that, most of the time you will get completely down, because now it is the opposite, you know. But to us kids, America, the USA was the greatest, the biggest and the best. And why? That is now something younger people will not know that, or will not have the feeling for that, but I will describe it as a kid, you know. When I play now with that ball, that gives me the feeling as back then in the early 90s as a kid, you know. That is why I play the ball. The same feeling like back then I have now with a Spalding, you know. Spalding was the best in the 90s, and so that is now great. But I will do it in the shadow now, because here it is a little bit hot. And so the USA as kids was the best. I told a few examples, but now I will go a little bit more into the details. Then you can maybe, only maybe, get a feeling how that was, you know. When you were born in the 80s and then lived in the late 80s, early 90s as a kid, there was no internet. That is number one. So you had no information, nothing. People who are born nowadays, they cannot imagine that. They can think of it, but they will not know it, because when you in your whole life had internet like the nowadays people, they cannot imagine how that was when you didn't have internet and no information. The only information was television or a newspaper or a magazine, that it was, you know. And so as a kid, the US, why? Once again, video games. There was Sega Mega Drive and Super Nintendo, SNES, Mario and Sonic. And they had the games before we had it, you know. So as a kid, that was the dream. Boy, the US, they had it much quicker. Why can we not live in the US? They have it half a year before us. And so we wished always, boy, in the US that would be great. But we had no imagination how the life was really there. But you only have heard the things, and what was reality? They had the games before us, you know. There was coming out Sonic 1. I had it on the Mega Drive 1991. Oh yeah, at Christmas 1991, and they had it before, and we wished, boy, you have it seen in the magazine and known, boy, the US kids can play it half a year before us, you know. So that was part number one. Then the next part was action figures. When you were a wrestling fan in the early 90s, WWF, WWF was growing, bam, and they had the action figures which were coming out from Hasbro. It was long before we had it. You have seen it on the television when they had advertisement, Shawn Michaels and this and that. Boy, the action figures, boy. And I always ask my grandmother, but when does they come to us? And she said, I don't know, maybe in a year. We have it a year later. You have seen that figure which was on television a year before. And so you thought, boy, in the US they have it so great. They have everything there, you know. And so to us, the US was always the best. That is a reason, you know. And when you then, I will also put in some videos and pictures then, and there were a lot of reasons, you know. By the wrestling, we come back to that, but then, for example, television, you know, the American Gladiators. That was one of my absolute favorite series of all time. They were before a Ninja Warrior came, yeah, American Gladiators. One guy asked me, you will know that for sure. He said he's 42, and then the people know it. American Gladiators in the early 90s to middle 90s, wow, that was amazing. You know, there was Nitro with the long hair. That was my hero. And Zap, you know, Zap with the blonde hair. That was amazing, you know. And so American Gladiators with the American flag on, boy, that was as a kid. Boy, you always watch, boy, America, America. We called it America, not USA, always America, you know. And yeah, that was amazing, you know, really, really amazing. And then the series, by us here, to me, you know, where I was growing up, sitcoms, Al Bundy. Al Bundy was the greatest from the sitcoms, you know, here by us. Al Bundy. We called, I don't know how is it called in English, this series. Here we only called it the Al Bundys. Now Al Bundy is playing. That was amazing, you know. But I also like the other sitcoms. There was Steve Urkel, you know, you will know it from back then, and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Will Smith, you know, but it was also a hero. So all USA, you know. And then we had a very good series. One thing, you know, or we come later to that. One thing we had in Europe better than in the USA, you know. But yeah, and then other actors, you know, Sylvester Stallone, my favorite actor, Sylvester Sly Stallone, Rambo, you know, wow, Rambo, when he puts in his thing, the long hair, and Rocky, you know, and Demolition Man with Wesley Snipes. So all the US things were the big thing here, you know. The US always, you had it on the cover. We had magazines, wow, Sly Stallone, the new film, USA, wow. That was amazing, you know. And yeah, when we come back to the wrestling or even music, you know, the cool thing was Prince, you know, wow, Prince. When he sang American Woman with Lenny Kravitz, you know, in the late 90s, Lenny Kravitz, you know, wow. So all US. And one thing was, you know, for example, the NBA, the NHL, all the cool American stuff that was not here. Now that has changed, the young generation does not know that. But wrestling, NBA players, and on, they were never here, you know, by us in my country. You know, I'm from Austria, that is important. I'm not from Germany. Many think I'm from Germany, but I have nothing to do with Germany, you know. I have much more to do with Italy. That is my next country, you know, and not with Germany. But I live there, but I'm from Austria, not Germany. And the NBA, for example, when you were a basketball fan, also street ball fan, all what was there, skateboarding, you know. Also by skateboarding, I will tell you something. What was popular in the 90s? In the early 90s, the most growing sport was inline skating, aggressive inline skating. And I talk to you now with the 42 years, you know, now, whom I'm talking with. Aggressive inline skating was becoming popular. The extreme games, you know, the X Games, they were in the USA. That was mind-blowing. Because, for example, in the early 90s here by me, we had no skate park. There was nothing existing. You know, nowadays people know, yeah, there is a skate park. They say now, boy, there is a skate park, that is shit, boy. And we would have wished only one ramp would be amazing. And so we have seen the things in the USA, they have skate parks. Wow. I had a book from Santa Cruz, I think it was. And they had those bowls, the mini bowls, you know. And then you have seen the X Games and the skate parks in the videos. And so, but it was, you wished that. And you thought, wow, in the USA they have that all. But we don't have it. But in the USA they have it, you know. And there was roller skating growing up. Maybe you have done it, aggressive inline skating. That was very popular. The VHS cassettes, Mad Beef and the Hawks, you know, with Arlo Eisenberg, you know. But Arlo Eisenberg was a phenomenal aggressive inline skater with the blonde hair, you know, like Elvis. And that videos, they were sensational. Brooke Howard-Smith was there. Chris Edwards, they filmed in New York City. You have seen that. Boy, and it was, boy, in New York, that has to be cool. Boy, amazing, you know. And then in the middle 90s to late 90s, skateboarding was coming up, you know. Tony Hawk was the most popular skater, especially with the PlayStation games. And you thought, boy, the USA, skateboarding. And then you have seen the street skating and Tony Hawk with word skating. And street skating, for example, there was the most popular guy out there in the later 90s, Chad Muska. If you have skateboarding done, here Chad Muska was the absolute highest of them all in skateboarding. When you wanted to have a shoe, it was the East Chad Muska shoe, you know. And the shorties from the company Shorties, the Chad Muska board, those combination, East Chad Muska and Chad Muska, the red one, the Shorties board, then you were the king, you know, in the late 90s. That was the sensation, Chad Muska, the cool guy, you know, from the USA. And then they were coming to us the first time ever. There was Kareem Campbell, one of the best street skateboarders in the world, first time here. And then for the first time ever, Tony Hawk in the late 90s, you know. That was sensational. With the Red Bull ramp, there were concerts, you know, the Bloodhound Gang were there, all the American style, you know. So that was amazing, you know. And so we said, wow, the VHS that it was, you know, the USA. And then same with streetball. When And One came up, you know, in the later 90s with the VHS DVDs, you know, and you have seen it on television, but the And One style. And One shoe was comparable to a high-end skateboard shoe, you know, DC or East shoe, And One was also. And you have seen that players, what they did. I've never seen anything like that. You have seen the Globetrotters, you know, from Harlem. But you have never seen styles from And One with the baggies. That was America. Wow, again, America. How can they do it? You have only heard the stories, but they can only do such things in the USA because they are growing up with the basketball in the hand, only playing in the backyards and do the whole thing playing streetball, you know. Because there was, in the later 90s, you had internet, but not that much. YouTube was not existing, you know. It was coming in 2005, I think, you know. And so there was nothing. And USA was absolutely sensational, you know. So with all things what we had, the USA was the biggest. And by wrestling, when we come back, when you were a wrestling fan in the early 90s, the biggest star was Hulk Hogan, you know. Hulk Hogan, maybe how he influenced the wrestling game, there was no one before and no one after, you know, in my opinion. When you lived in that era, that was a small little era, but, you know, later on, there was The Rock then, and Stone Cold Steve Austin, but that was other. But the Hulk brought the wrestling scene up. First one on the high-end television, you know, by the films. And that was amazing, you know, by the Rocky film with Sly Stallone, but also Roddy Piper. But when Hulk Hogan entered in, people may not remember that. It was with the American flag, and the entrance song was I'm a Real American. And as a kid, you know, I've seen Hulk Hogan in the late 80s. First match was against Andre the Giant, the legendary match with the body slam. And from there on, I've seen it, you know. And then in the early 90s, Hulk Hogan, how he went in with the American flag. And as a kid, that was, America was the good, America was the best. They are the survivor from the whole people in the world. That was, as a kid, for us here, you know. And so Hulk Hogan, the big star, the good guy for the kids, then he has to be the best. And with the American flag, we have seen that and thought, wow, American flag, that would be the best. And that song, I will play you in something. When you remember that in the dome with against the Ultimate Warrior, you know, and Hulk Hogan, wow, that was the thing, you know. And so, and you have idolized those wrestling stars, but they were never here. You have never had the chance that they were here. Same with NBA players and skateboarders in the early 90s. And then in 1994, for the first time ever, the wrestling stars came, you know. And when you watch that, you know, Shawn Michaels as a kid was the coolest guy on earth, you know. To me and to many others, Shawn Michaels really was the coolest one. When you have seen that entrance, you know, with his music, that was amazing, you know. Then with Sensational Sherry on his side, absolutely cool. And those teams, you know, there were the Steiner brothers, Scott and Rick Steiner, Demolition of Doom, Sid Vicious, the Macho Man, and on and on and on, you know. That was cool, you know. Teddy DiBiase, Money, you know, Money Inc. Yeah, and then the first time ever Bret the Hitman Hart was here. There were only two things which, you know, when you had posters in your room, All America, Only America, you know. There exists a reportage, the Rim Breakers, and basketball, these were basketball teenagers from Germany, I don't know, from Berlin, I think. Cannot say it now exactly. That was also made in 1994 or 3, you know, around. And they were playing streetball. And they also, when you see that reportage nowadays, America was the best. Genau, exactly for that reasons. To us it was so. And the only thing what you had in your room were NBA posters, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant later on, you know, and such things. And skateboard posters, USA. Tennis players, when we come to there, who were the greatest tennis players back then? Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi. These were the big idols. Nike, Pete Sampras, Andre Agassi, the coolest guys. And then you had posters from them.
That's pretty good stuff right here. This Ringo, someone's tennis mites.
and so on. Only USA. The only two things what comes to my mind which were acceptable, these were Bret the Hitman Hart from Canada. You had also posters from him. And the other thing was later on in the 90s, in the late 90s, Anna Kurnikova from Russia. You had her also there, but all other were all USA based, you know. And so for us kids, when you think back how that was, and there was no internet, you had no information, you could not order like nowadays. I can order it from the US or such things, then I have it at the same time. Or you see documentaries and this and that. You didn't have that. You only have seen, but they have all what we liked before us. They had the coolest things, the coolest guys, all was good. And so we idolized the USA, you know. And to me there were only two countries, Italy and the USA, nothing else, you know. And so the USA style was absolutely amazing, you know. And yeah, and Bret the Hitman Hart was here. I've seen it when the first time ever the WWF, back then, now WWE, the first time ever they were here. And I have seen Bret the Hitman Hart in the building, you know. Before there was other wrestling organization here, there I've seen Coco Beware, you know, and the Doink. And then later on there was coming Lex Luger, you know, also where they tried to make the same example like Hulk Hogan, but didn't function that good anymore. And there was my time with Shawn Michaels, the first one. I will show you clips, then you know what I mean. But we come back to nowadays. Nowadays, when you say you like the USA, I come with an American flag. Most of the time, boom, people hate you, you know, because they think from nowadays. But when I say, wow, the American ball, and I am completely hyped, you know, then I think back from the late 80s, early 90s, how that was. And I had this American street ball, which was fantastic, you know. That was American flag on, that was sensational. Only because the flag was on, we loved to play and filters. Now we are a little bit the same like the kids there in America, you know. And that was amazing. And also by wrestling, not to forget Mabel, you know, how it was called, the tag team mission. We Are on a Mission, I think, or with Mabel, you know, what a giant. I loved Mabel, you know, that was such a cool guy. But I will show you some clips and then we come to nowadays, because nowadays what I like is Italy. You know, they have now a style which is a bit similar to the early 90s USA style. And I'll show you. I don't know, I am not sponsored, you know, I don't get money, I'm not in the partner program. If they deleted out this video now, then it is so, but I will show you a clip what I filmed from the television, the tag teams, and then you can a little bit imagine what I mean with the USA style from back then. And one thing is, because before we do the clips, one thing I told you was better here in Europe than in the USA. There was one thing which comes to my mind, and that were the flooders. In the US, I don't know if this is popular, you had Chevy Chase, you know. Chevy Chase with his films, they tried the same thing as the flooders did. I will write in English, I don't know how the film was called in English, from Chevy Chase. There were ones in Las Vegas and one other, you will see that. But the flooders were better, I tell you that. The flooders were better. They were from the Netherlands, you know. They had a series with, I don't know, 60 around or 70 around series, but they had three main big films, you know, in the 80s and 90s, and they were also in the USA when they're flying there, and that was the most popular, you know, Kees Vlodder. But she was not originally from the Netherlands. Kees Vlodder, she's called Tatjana Simic in her original name, and she was born in Zagreb in Croatia, you know. I was also in Zagreb, I have a few stories from there, but that is the other thing. And that was mind-blowing, you know. We watched that as a kid, and that was the only thing where you thought, wow, that is here better than in the USA, the flooders, you know. Then it was, you know. And now we come to the clips. You will see Mabel, the entrance, you know. I was there when this tag team entered in for the first time ever on a Raw series. I have seen it on VHS, you know. Also my granddad, how it is called, recorded it on VHS, and the next day I got the VHS from him and we watched it. I have seen it. He said, "Boy, there is a new tag team. Such a big guy you cannot imagine." And that was Mabel. Watch it now. Now you have seen that it was amazing, you know, the style, the hip hop, all what they had. Wow, that was American style. We didn't have that here, you know. You have not seen such a style here. And then the entrance of Hulk Hogan. Then you can imagine what that was with the American flag, you know, the good guy, the hero, and so. Watch that.
I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American, fight for what's right, fight for your life. When it comes crashing down and it hurts inside, you gotta take a stand, it don't have to hide. If you have my friends, then you have my pride. I gotta be a man, I can't let it slide. I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American, fight for what's right, fight for your life. I feel strong about right and wrong, and I don't take trouble for very long. I got something deep inside of me. Courage is the thing that keeps us free. I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American, fight for what's right, fight for your life. I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American, fight for what's right, fight for your life.
You have also seen that. And then Shawn Michaels, you know, Bret the Hitman Hart, that was also, watch that. To me, the best wrestler that ever lived, you know, with Shawn Michaels together. But technically, Bret Hart was in their own league, you know. Bret the Hitman Hart.
Ladies and gentlemen, the king of the ring, Bret the Hitman Hart, the pink and black attack, here it comes. And listen to this reception. What a following this youngster has. There's nobody that can stop the Hitman. The Hitman, Bret Hart, has just about done it all. Excellence of execution. Two-time co-holder of the Tag Team Championship. Two-time holder of the Intercontinental Championship. And of course, we've seen history made. A new World Wrestling Federation champion. I am the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. Dedicate this moment to all the people that believe that the biggest dreams can still come true.
But he's from Canada, so that was the only thing where you also watched, you know. And then Shawn Michaels. When you see that entrance, and I always remember when I think of him, the early, not the version with Marty Jannetty, then the next step, you know. That was the coolest thing to me in the early to middle 90s. The entrance, Shawn Michaels, that was, wow.
I think he's cute. He's so sexy. He's got the look. This rider goes wild. Got the moves that really move me. He sends chills up and down my spine. Just my sexy boy. He's not your boy toy. He's just my sexy shiver. My knees get weak when he comes around. I see him walk, I hear him talk. He makes me feel like I'm on cloud nine. He's just my sexy boy. He's not your boy toy. He's just my sexy boy. He's not your boy toy. Eat your heart out, girl. Hands off of the merchandise.
As a kid, you always did that. We made the wrestling moves, the sweet chain music with the feet we tried out from Shawn Michaels. That was sensational, you know. And then, when we have that, yeah, the skateboard clips and one clips and what you know. But when we come then to nowadays, you know, because I said in Italy reminds me a little bit nowadays as it was in the early 90s here, what we thought about the USA. And there are musicians, I will show you that. One of them is Komagote. Watch her.
Yeah, yeah. Allo. Pronto fratellino, tutto a posto. Ieri un tipo come ha fatto il grosso. Bazzica tra Moscova e Corso Como. Ultimamente se la sente troppo. Zona 4 chiama, subito rispondo. Giro in ciabatta a Piazzale Cuoco. Cocaina, cocaina, quarto e portafoglio. Il tuo tipo mi guarda come un film porno. Tutte queste squee prodotte da non so chi passano da Dawson Creek a sentirsi tutte tra qui. Ricordo quel venerdì, una tipa ha fatto la G. Sei stata zitta dopo averle offerto un cazzo free drink. Come gigesti la chilo, tu nel privé sei uno squillo. Se guardi troppo ti chilo, non dissi se io c'ho problema ti squillo. Scemi i piedi, dico bassi, quattro peli negri, iscrizioni in sicurezza. Miei amici veri piangono messi se non sostieni la loro feccia. Con te no apro togliti quel cazzo di cazzo ma giocarne cruda. Ci provi da tanto a Milano comando facciamo gare chi più punta. Torna a casa Alessi, tanto vinto, ho la sindrome di Peter Pan. Yabba dabba tutti come Cristo, la tua pussa è larga, che c'ha.
You see, it is a little bit such a style, you know, the hip hop, and I am more to Italy than to Germany. I was in Milano, and now from Milano there's one singer now, Tokyo, you know, her name is Tokyo from Milano. Amazing, watch her.
Oro giallo, pensola un sonno. Non parlarmi, sto bevendo Cyrock. Dopo un litro parlo come Byron. Diamanti sui denti come un cyborg. Gemma grezza come shampoo. Zona 4 come un film survivor. Prima scamo, ora mangio wagyu. Il mio negro lo scambio per Tyson. Troie che vestono Shane, cocchetta Calvin Klein, Jolie non è body shaming. È una gara chi mostra il ferro più grosso per colmare il vuoto che c'hanno là sotto. Cosa c'è là sotto? Sottoterra come a Ford, non ci vivi a conto, lascia stare uomo, non è il tuo lavoro.
Andiamo con la city controllando il monopolio. Dímelo tu Tokyo, un fratello aiuta al otro. Saliamo paso dopo paso, lejos de envidioso. Siamo en nueva escena, eso que les duele a otro. Milano zona 4, los ragazzi meten mano.
In una junta 17, calpestano il pantano. Passo dopo passo mi chiamano capitano. Internazionale da Chile a Milano, da Chile a Milano. Mi faccio dentro Pantera, mi vado a raggio che dico la testa sta fuera. Mi parli di mafia, vengo dall'Italia, ma ogni barrio di sto mondo gridate se ama. Cucino barre, cucino la pasta. Mentre parli sto largando la mappa. Non mi fonti perché sono. Mi sembri una prostituta, trafficata tipo dall'Honduras. Di quelle che non durano nada. Chi mi chiama, chi ti porta a casa. Sto perdendo tutta la pazienza. Non è bella poi la conseguenza. Parli troppo, sai per i miei gusti. Ti sistemo la bocca coi pu.
And there you get a little bit those vibes, so that is absolutely cool. And then there is this in a little bit in the near of Milano, but was banned to play concerts there, you know. Baby Gang. And there's one song which she did that was, I think, last year, which is a summer song that is so amazing. Even with auto-tune, I'm not a fan of such things, you know, when the voice is other, but that vibes, you know, watch that. It is such a cool vibe, the smooth vibe, the happiness, the easiness, the coolness, like in the USA. Watch that clip here.
La legge non funziona un cazzo.
Tu me quieres, dove sei mi amor? Sono sempre dentro il tuo corazon. Quelle sere esco da una prison, torno nei quartieri nella zone. Non va bene, o come si come sa, non girare intorno come il tag dalle sirene. Le sirene. E buenos días, documenti polizia. Tengo 20 kg di Ave Maria. Hai fumato, bevuto alcol, sento puzza di indoor. Che lo che mami, io soy loco, io soy il papi. Sono solo una moto ninja Kawasaki. Sulle mani la casa cabron, svuota la casa Ford. E mamma Webo, non sai quanto io ci piego. Io non faccio le chiamate, il mio ego mi ha portato parecchio condon. Ma a me non me ne importa una sega. Sento padre vota lega. E che in fondo un po' mi odia e non
I have seen that. And then there is Rondo da Sosa, you know, also a rapper. He's from Milan, you know, and he made now a new song with an American flag on. Absolutely amazing. And the clothing, you know, watch at me, the bands over the knees, you know, the white clothes and the cool thing. That was the vibe. And watch him with the best when he was sitting on the basketball ring, you know. Wow, watch that. You have seen that. And then the new video from him with the American flag and such things, you know, the style, that was, reminds me completely to the early 90s, what we thought about the USA.
I'm from Milan, I'm from Milan, I'm from Milan, I'm from Milan.
Porto la motion in Italy. Snow bunny, bitches chiedono threesome, rispondo shit. Spendo 50 dopo 50, tanto li rifaccio quick. Hey yo DJ, questa merda è lì, fai ripartire sta shit.
This is a certified hood classic.
I'm a real hustler, sono nello strip. Sto lanciando soldi, real stepper, stavo nella street. Ora siamo famosi, real man, e sono fatto pull up. Li abbiamo fatti fuori, portami rispetto. Ho flippato milioni e milioni. Vengo da San Siro, ghetto baby e type shit. Rapper che mi odiano, gli faccio fare stretching. 10 toes down, in strada sto sempre attento. Milano e Milano e a Milano è piena di bitches.
Where I'm from, man, ain't no sunshine. Gonna shine on the dog's bill. If you don't, get out on the grind, doing time. No play out. Turn up my head, just the hand, the shake in the night. Never stop my head. It's all from Milan. I'm 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 from Milan.
Benvenuto a Milano. Tu vieni da Milano centro, ok bitch, io vengo dal ghetto. È una crazy city da dove provengo, giungla di cemento. Pusher e droga sempre in movimento. Parlo in slang, non uso il dialetto. Chiamo il plug, lo becco al corvetto. Scendo di casa su in tuta di felpa. Prego di non finire vittima del sistema. Sharon Zuma, liar, spendo Rex, ma ne vale la pena. Sono in Lombardia, ho una stick sotto la cadrega gang. Creano set, non un flex, questa è merda vera. A Milano coi balordi oppure con i baby gangster. MI Girella e siamo pieni di catene.
And then, as last one, my most favorite singer of them all, and she's in the near of Milano, you know, Roma, but also in Milano with videos, you know, the connection. Her name is Shark. Now the camera was overheated, but you know, when you watch her, Shark is her name, And that reminds me also, my absolute favorite female musician, you know, amazing, watch that.
Pau pau, tir criminal, crimi crimi. Street habitat, sono in strada un mitraglietta. Mitraglietta, mitraglietta. Se tu fai due rec, ci vediamo testa a testa. Mostrami le palle, risolviamo testa a testa. Street habitat, sono in strada un mitraglietta. Mitraglietta, mitraglietta. Se tu fai due rec, ci vediamo testa a testa. Mostrami le palle, risolviamo testa a testa. Casa popolare, soffitto perdeva acqua. Ma famiglia mancava, ho sofferto la mancanza. Sentivo distanza, vuota la stanza. Ti ho visto fare un cazzo, hai fatto un buco nell'acqua. Ogni allora faccio l'anni, scappo dal poliziei, poliziei. Criminal, crimini, giù in street, credimi. Rapine, crimini, fanno solo robe e crimi. Per stare in uno chalet, spiagge belle come
Questo non è un test. È autorizzato l'uso di armi classe 4 o inferiore durante lo sfogo. Tutte le altre armi sono proibite. Che Dio sia con tutti
ho
voi.
sofferto tanto, figlio di puttana. Nessuno in casa, ho fatto da sola. Rovite la strada, ci campo una favola. Niente vacanza, ti vendevo tu. Fumo con Bel Air, noleggio un Cayenne. Facce da Lupin, armi sovietiche vengono da te. Ash white carta da forno, è fresh come Coco Pearl. Tutto nella Gucci stingo, tutto turbo e metro, tutto turbo wall. Non fare il furbo, fumo tipo turco, mica bagno turco. Stavo senza cesso, pisciato in un ron. Rabbia alla sfogo, sfogo, rabbia al prossimo. Macchine tutte sport, sono tutte sport, non ho mai fatto sport. Non sono nell'off, ma sono in soft, tutto alla costa. Giro sopra un Benz, prima sopra un bus, porto come il drive. Facevo a dettagli, facevo a dettagli. Palazzi alti, come nel Bronx. Gente sogna di stare ai Caraibi. Da ragazzina alla stanza di un padre, mamma non è riuscita a
Now you have a little bit of thing how she is, you know, that reminds me also with the style, like the 90s style America, you know. Yeah, you have seen it, absolutely cool, and that I like very much, so I'm much more to Italy than to Germany. And that is the story about, you know, I could say much more about the USA, but when I have such a ball, you know, the USA ball with that flag, that reminds me as a kid how that was, wow, you know, that was so amazing, you know, absolutely amazing. And so that reminds me back, you know, when I play with this ball now. That has nothing to do with now also, but as a kid, the same feeling again, you know, like now it is, yeah, 36 years later, I have the same feeling, you know. That was cool. That it was. I hope you liked that. We go on with the basketball courts, training with my basketball, with the American ball, how I call it, you know. Let me see us. Until then, bye and ciao.